Welcome to Old Guy Tech,
the OGT.TV recording studio.
Technology for the rest of us.
Hey, this is Rob, Old Guy Tech TV Interviews, and today I have Howard Penn running for Supervisor, El Dorado County District 4. And Howard, I want to thank you very much for coming in and spending a little bit of time with us. I think we have about 10 days until those absentees start hitting, so things are getting really close on there for you.
Thank you for having me. And yes, they are getting close.
Yeah. I always tell everybody, and you've probably seen it 1,000 times, you've seen my videos out there, I want to thank you for running. Because the only way that our process works is that we have an opportunity for people to come up and voice their opinions and are willing to spend the time and the effort to help us. And we need people to run. And all the time we hear from a lot of people, my vote doesn't count for anything, right? Yeah. And it's just the opposite. In a local election, your vote counts more than anything else. Yeah. And from school boards to fire boards to a supervisor, water, just whatever we need. We need people to run. And so thank you very much for doing that.
Well, absolutely. It's one of the things I tell a lot of the people I talk to about how getting involved on local elections, you have so much more impact with your vote.
You do.
Than you do on a state or a federal level.
Absolutely.
And so, the number of people that are going to vote in this election are not huge. And so each one of those votes is going to be very important. Everyone is important.
We've had elections in El Dorado County that have been decided by one vote.
Yes, they have. Yes.
So that's one of those things where you go, oh my gosh, if I had just voted that day, yes, I could have gotten somebody else. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Hawaii. Moved around a lot as a kid. My dad worked as a college administrator for many universities, and so I grew up on campuses basically throughout the United States. University of Texas, Boston University, Franklin College.
Got to live in a lot of different areas.
I did get to live in a lot of different areas, and that's I missed having a home as a permanent home, but as a young child I got to experience a lot of the United States. So my mom was a teacher, and so grew up in a teacher academic household, and every night when we went to dinner, my dad's request was that we had to read up on some current affair.
Excellent.
And he didn't care what our position was.
Right.
He just wanted us to be able to speak intelligently and informed about an issue and then talk about it at dinner time.
I knew a number of families back in the 50s. I'm maybe a little older than you are, but that was something that was very normal because the news came maybe from the television, but almost strictly from print.
Right.
And my dad used to go through the paper and say, hey, let's talk about this. And I think that's how you get involved with watching the news and watching the events. Right. So that was a great learning experience.
Well, and it got me really involved in civics and understanding what the impacts of people participating were at a very young age. And so when I went through college, I started my first company when I was in college. It was in the tech industry back in the 80s when the desktop and the PC world was taking off.
Right.
And from there, I built 10 to 11 companies over the last 25 plus years. Was in San Francisco for years, opened an office in New York and San Francisco, did that. I got involved in a business up here in El Dorado County back in the mid-90s, and that drew me to El Dorado County. I fell in love with the area, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the local pastry chef, and made this
good.
It's a wonder I'm not 600
That's
pounds.
Right, yeah.
But enjoyed being in El Dorado County and just fell in love with living here. So made this my permanent home.
Excellent.
Used to own the Sierra Nevada house since 1999. Sold that a couple years ago. I'm now in partnership with the bakery that Teal and I own in Lotus, and have done that. Good. I do some consulting work for startup companies in the area, and have still kept my hands involved in the startup/entrepreneurial world for the last 5 or 6 years as well.
That should lend itself very well to the supervisor role situation.
It should, and that's one of the things that I've been really focusing on in terms of communicating my strategies of job growth, because we all know that we need more jobs in the region, in the Sacramento region, as well as also in El Dorado County.
Absolutely, and we need jobs desperately for a number of reasons. Of course, we need the tax base, but we need to be able to keep our youth in our and also the group from 30s to 40s stay in El Dorado County, because right now to get a career, where do you go?
Sacramento, or you telecommute to San Francisco.
If you can.
If you
can get the
broadband.
Medical.
If you get the broadband to support yourself.
Yeah, good luck on that one. Right.
Yes, exactly.
We'll talk about that one another time.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, focusing on jobs is really important. And so everyone's talking about that.
Right.
To come up with complicated strategies. It's not easy to do, but to come up with strategies on how to do that is critical. And so for me, kind of an overall general strategy is instead of trying to attract one 5,000 employee company like a HP or Intel,
Right.
who are most likely not going to move into El Dorado County anytime soon,
Right.
it's going to be better for us to build and incubate 50, 100-person companies. The nice thing about that is it creates a much more stable base for employment because you don't have some corporate executive off in Delaware or New York City deciding to move their office somewhere else immediately. And I've worked with so many of these local entrepreneurs who live in El Dorado County, but they open their businesses in Sacramento.
Right.
And why? And so when I talk to them, some of them clients, some of them people I've just met, they explain the complications of having a business here in El Dorado County. And so extracting that information and coming up with solutions and how to meet their needs and keep the businesses here is going to be really key.
It's interesting. Some of the businesses are actually here in El Dorado County. I mean, we have a company that makes submarines.
Yes.
Schilling's
Robotic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like,
I toured their plant. That's an amazing plant if you haven't been there.
I haven't.
It
no.
absolutely is amazing. And they have all these very, very high-end machines costing millions of dollars. The challenge they have is the workforce.
Yeah.
It's challenging for them to find qualified, trained technicians, machinists to work
Right.
this equipment.
I understand that. Yeah.
And they'll have
yeah.
$100,000 worth of titanium material sitting on a tray right next to this machine that they have to run through it
Yeah.
to engineer these robotic arms for deep immersion, deep
Right.
submarines. So
Yeah.
it's really
yeah.
it's an amazing place.
It's neat. It's
And
neat
another
to see
company
that.
like Blue Solar, they're
Yeah.
in El Dorado Hills.
Yeah.
They're doing very well. STEM Express is another one that's kind of been shown as an example of the type of tech businesses we can get in this county.
in tech, medical style
Med
businesses.
tech,
Yeah.
ag tech,
Yep.
clean tech. These are the types of industries that we can look at.
Right.
The Sacramento region is working really hard on this. Unfortunately, it hasn't done a very good job in the last decade or so. And
Sure.
in fact, Forbes magazine just came out with Sacramento as the 4th worst city to start a business in. And so we need to change that. And so I've been to a number of regional meetings with SARTA
Yeah.
and startup companies like that. I was at one the other night where there was a number of investors. One of the other challenges we have in this region is private capital.
Right.
We don't have access to the investment capital that you have in the Bay Area.
Yeah, the venture capital situation is interesting. They wouldn't even look at El Dorado County for the most part.
No. And so what's happening is we're starting conversations with individuals in Sacramento and with people that have moved here recently in El Dorado.
Right.
I find that after years of running a restaurant and a bar and having everyone come to me, I learned, talking with the individuals, how many of them are transplanted entrepreneurs
Sure.
to this region.
Right.
And so I have kind of a new little anecdotal statistic, not proven or factual at all, just my anecdote,
Right.
is that I feel like there's more entrepreneurs per capita in this county than there are in Silicon Valley. And the reason I think that is because when I was working in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, you have 1 or 2 people that start Google, and you have 10,000 employees. Up here, you have one person that starts,
Whatever.
Old guy
Like
to
old
TV.
guy tech, right.
and you have 2 or 3 people that work for you. And so there's lots and lots of these small businesses with entrepreneurs in this area.
Well, we know, statistics borne out. I mean, I believe it's as high as 90% of all businesses in the United States are small business.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so without us, where would the economy be? And it always strikes me, why do we put hindrances into businesses coming in the counties?
Right.
I mean, if you look at our situation with, with TIM fees,
Yes.
hookup fees, water fees, all these other fees, before you even put that shovel in the ground, many cases you're $40,000 or $50,000 into the process.
Absolutely. And the biggest challenge for any jurisdiction or municipality in the past 35 plus years since Prop 13 was put in place
Right.
is finding additional revenue sources. And so by default, jurisdictions have looked at these type of fee structures
Right.
as ways of being able to raise money for
Exactly.
necessary infrastructure. and
Maybe
city costs.
fire, may it be. I mean, we're already fighting the fire tax thing. The one that really irks me the most is the unsecured property tax.
Oh, gotta love that one.
I mean,
I write that check every year and it's like, oh, really?
yeah, you kind of go, okay, so you want my business in El Dorado County, but guess what? We're going to penalize you as you grow and as you add equipment. So we want to penalize
Well, you're going to pay
you.
sales tax on it when you buy it.
There's
right?
your tax
then
once.
you're going to pay for all the maintenance. A good example is in the restaurant business, you have refrigeration that goes down all the time.
Sure.
The amount of money you're spending every month or year
Right.
on just maintenance
Right.
on a piece of equipment. And then at the end of the year, you got to write a check to the state or to the government
county.
for the
Yeah.
county.
Yeah.
It's actually a state mandated program.
Right, I
that
understand.
The county
The
maintains.
gets, right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And it's not an easy form to fill out either.
No.
In fact, there's been times when there's discrepancies between forms from what they had the previous year and this year.
Sure.
And it'll take you a year and a half to solve it. So,
It's very difficult having filled that form out because I do it for
Yes.
us.
Yes.
It's very difficult and always has been.
Yeah.
And I hate the label, unsecured property tax. I mean, I don't know.
well,
Anyway,
here's just to finish up on that. The suggestion I make to a lot of business owners with that is to make sure that they stay on top of the equipment that they have, because
Right.
many times you'll take a piece of equipment and it'll go bad and you'll
Right.
throw it away, but you won't take it off your form.
Right.
And often you'll look 3, 4, 5 years down the road
And you've
and
been
go, I just
paying
been
on
paying
it.
taxes on this piece of equipment that doesn't work
Exactly.
anymore and hasn't for 5 years. So
exactly.
staying on top of it's also challenging.
Yeah, and same thing for us. I mean, what bothers me is that we've got a couple pieces of equipment here that are virtually not going to go bad for 10 years, right?
Right.
So you list that, and so every year you're paying on that
Right.
same, and it just so. I always look at how are we going to make El Dorado County business friendly when we already know that the state wants to take all your money as possible, the county needs all the money as it can. Do you have a solution? An idea?
I have a few ideas. Yes.
Okay.
So let's start with the temp fees that you mentioned,
Okay.
the traffic impact mitigation fees.
Right.
One of the reasons why those fees are so high is because we keep projecting large amounts of housing developments on the 50 corridor.
Correct.
In order for us as a county to pay for all the infrastructure to support that, which was supposed to be with Measure Y, paid for by the developers that are building
Right.
those houses and
Exactly.
the impact that they create, that hasn't really been executed that way with the temp fee program. It's been spread out across the entire county, and so people that live in the South County or live in the Divide
Right.
are paying road impact fees to support the infrastructure cost on 50 for big developers to build all these massive housing developments.
Exactly.
We can change that by changing the projection. Instead of projecting 33,000 homes for the next 20 years, we can reduce that projection, therefore reduce the capital improvement plan projection. And when we get the $810 million capital improvement plan down to $600 million or $550 million over the next 15 to 20 years, we can reduce those temp fees.
Right.
We can't reduce those fees until we reduce our projections.
Okay.
So that's the first step.
Right.
We got to reduce those temp fees.
Right.
The second thing we can do is we can incent commercial development. We know absolutely that the equation that we calculate our traffic on 50
Right.
is intricately linked to the number of jobs that you have in the region. That if you increase the number of jobs you have, the equation they calculate for traffic on 50 goes down. Right now we know that in morning commute hours, traffic on 50 is at level of service F. We
Right.
got that from Caltrans, we know that.
Absolutely.
We're not going to add a fourth lane. Caltrans has already told us they're not going to add any more lanes to Highway 50. So the only way we can significantly reduce our traffic and the traffic impacts on 50 is by adding jobs. Once we do that, then we'll have a different level of service, and we have a little bit more flexibility as what we can do long term. In order to get those jobs here, we can incent commercial development in the spots that maybe some of these massive housing developments would have gone otherwise.
Right.
One of the challenges that we have is not only access to private capital, and we're companies that are wanting to move into this area region, Sacramento or El Dorado County, get access to investment capital to start their business. We also have challenges with facilities. Most of our facilities in El Dorado County for businesses are not the type of office space where you can start with 5 or 10 employees and grow to 50 or 100.
Right.
Most of them are small professional offices, can hold 10, 15, 20 employees, but you're not going to be able to grow very much.
Right.
The 2 business parks that we have still have available space, and some of those spaces would have to be redeveloped for office space as opposed to light industry or so forth.
Right.
And those are the types of things that we can focus on to be able to create the facilities for people to be here and the attraction incentives to make that happen.
Yeah,
And we do need to do incentives.
Well, yes, we do.
We
I
do.
mean, Texas is a great example.
Yeah,
right?
Texas comes and gets all of our businesses to move to Texas.
Yeah.
They've been doing this for years.
Yes.
And they're good at it.
And they're good at it.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's a it's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. Why don't we do this? What year did you move up here?
I started my first business here back in the mid-90s.
Okay. So I've been here since '82, and pre-Intel. I was just going to give you a little history here. Pre-Intel. So Intel came in and decided they wanted to build a facility somewhere in the Sacramento area region because of the decrease in earthquakes. Okay,
Yes.
because of the steadiness of our land and the way the shale and rock and everything works here, it will not be like it would be in the Bay Area.
Right.
So they were smart enough to think forward, going, you know what, we need to build a plant somewhere where we could probably be safe.
Sure.
So they came up here and they looked at Folsom and they looked at El Dorado County. So they came, and they said, okay, we're down to these two locations.
I could probably already predict what happened there. That's an obvious outcome.
Yeah,
but
and
El Dorado County probably said, "Nah, no, thank you. We're not going to do anything." For
That's
it.
exactly what they
That's
did.
I'm sure
And
that did.
they were so myopic in their decision about what they weren't interested in giving anything. Folsom said, "I'll bring in your water.
Right.
I'll build your roads. I'll give you 10 years tax relief. And Intel said, well, that's done."
Here's an important equation to understand with that. Many people, and as I'm on the campaign trail and talking with a lot of voters in the area in my district, people keep bringing up, well, we don't want to give our tax money away to a company, a private company that's making money and coming into this county. We want to be careful about doing that. And I say I appreciate that, absolutely. Being fiscally responsible is absolutely important. But we can absolutely show empirically with data that if counties or jurisdictions like El Dorado County don't do some type of incentive with businesses, and it doesn't mean giving the taxpayers the tax dollars away. It usually means things
Right.
like forgiving certain taxes,
Exactly.
like property taxes or sales tax. There's different incentive models.
Yeah.
And you can also build things like business investment districts and so forth so that there can be incentives for businesses to move into them. If we don't do those types of things, we're going to find ourselves paying as taxpayers a lot more money 10 years down the road because of the costs associated with not having jobs here. That is an absolute that we know. We've seen that for 20 years now in this county, and we're not going to get to a balanced, sustainable economic base unless we do that. Because here's the problem: we're challenged because we keep playing. We're playing in the sandbox with all these other jurisdictions, including Texas,
Right.
that are doing this.
Right.
And it's kind of like, I'll use my own personal analogy. When I got into the campaign, I decided I was going to follow the rules. And they made me sign a document at the elections department that says I was not going to put signs up unless I asked for private property permission and not put it in setbacks, in the DOT setbacks.
Right,
So I
right.
just chose not to do that. I chose to put all my signs out legally. Well, everyone else is not putting their signs out legally. And so my campaign team comes to me and goes, "Howard, you can't do that." And I said, "Well, I'm trying to play by the rules." And they're saying, you can't do that. You can't lose the election just because you're trying to play by the rules. So that same thing is true with incentives
Yeah.
for business. If El Dorado County doesn't step up to the plate and play in this big boy world and go after these businesses like every other jurisdiction does,
Right.
we're going to lose.
Yeah, and if you look at the general plan and you look at what we already have areas set aside for
We
development
do.
in offices. I mean, things that are basically shovel-ready projects that are ready to go, if we would make the right incentives.
Yes.
I use the example, it kills me that we don't have a Ford store in El Dorado County.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, I look at it, the number one truck in America is F-150, and we don't have a Ford store here. And part of the problem is there's no incentive for a dealership, if they haven't been in business
Yes.
already for 20, 25 years, if we don't give them some kind of incentive, they come on back.
Right.
What happened is we did have a Ford store that was here for almost 30 years. They were bought out by somebody that I understood actually embezzled all the money, and it was closed down within a year.
Right.
So I'm going, gosh, all those tax dollars, because car dealerships are big tax makers.
Yeah.
They really are.
That's something that the Buxton report pointed out, is that our sales tax leakage out of the county
Yep.
is significant for big ticket items.
Yes.
That's where the biggest bulk of our sales tax leakage is. It's in cars, it's in appliances,
Yep.
it's those big ticket
The
items
big
that people
items.
buy out of the county and then bring here.
Yeah.
So a car dealership, or buying your washer and dryer at the local stores as opposed to buying them down in Folsom,
Right.
keeps the sales tax here.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we can do as a county, and I think many of the chambers and business associations can help with this, is doing a buy local program. Start to educate and inform how important it is for us to buy stuff in our county.
In the 38 some years that I've been here, that buy local program has been brought up at least a dozen times.
And not been done.
And in small spurts,
Yes.
but never stays. And part of the reason is that we as or I should say the Chamber of Commerce isn't in a position to actually hire somebody
Right.
that it's their full-time job to do that.
Right.
And that's what we need.
Well, and
You know.
I sit on the county chamber board, and I'm also president of the Coloma Lotus Chamber. And one of the things that the chambers are very good at is being very conservative, very wise with
Sure,
their money because
sure.
they don't have a lot of it.
Right.
But there are ways for us as a county jurisdiction to help with that. We have an economic development department. We've
Yep.
actually just hired a new director to come onto that recently in January. And there is money in that budget to start to look at some of these types of programs. So as a supervisor, that responsibility and role is to set policy and to set direction.
Right.
And then empower the people that are doing those programs, whether it's paying your economic development director or
Right. Whatever it may be.
working in conjunction and partnership with the chambers.
And we do a pretty good job in attracting tourism. It's not, it's not perfect, but it's not bad. And then we also look at trying to bring film producers and movies
Yep, the
being
Film
made
Commission,
here.
yes.
Yeah. And it's an okay deal. It's got to be the right location. And it seems to me like the head of that particular department changes awfully quickly, which tells me what they want to do doesn't get done very often.
Well, the Visitors Authority, we've had a couple different directors over the last 15 or 20 years. The current director, Jody Franklin, has actually been there for a few years now.
She has, yeah.
And Kathleen has been here for a very long time. She's with the Film Commission. She's been here for over 20 plus years.
And she's done a good job.
She's absolutely
Right.
amazing, the amount of film. And what's challenging for her is that she's competing against, again, this is the same situation, same story.
Sure.
She's competing against other jurisdictions, other counties and cities and states that are doing much more incentives to get movies in. Because when a
Right.
movie comes in and drops $1 million for
Oh, yeah.
3 weeks worth of filming,
Oh,
that
yeah.
money stays in your local county.
It does.
It's
Your restaurants, your hotels,
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
all of it, and then all the tax dollars as well. I mean, it's a great opportunity.
in the tourism industry and in the economic development world. I worked for many years overseas doing tourism development and economic development as micro enterprises in other countries. And one of the things that many of these governments look at when they look at tourism dollars is that you don't have to supply the infrastructure for the tourist.
Right.
And so, you need nominal infrastructure,
Right.
but you don't need the major infrastructure that you need, like for your residents. And so those dollars that come in have a bigger bang for their buck. At the same time, you want to be careful about what those, the impacts. If you're bringing tourists into a very sensitive, low impact area, like I
Right.
was in many of these countries that were bringing things into rainforests and
Right.
creating tourists to go to these type of places.
Yeah.
That's different than bringing tourists into South Lake Tahoe, Apple Hill.
Sure.
But we do know that in Apple Hill, for example, they've got traffic problems on
Oh, yeah.
weekends in the fall. And so doing a traffic analysis, which El Dorado County Transportation Commission and DOT are doing right now, to analyze how they can reduce those traffic impacts in Apple Hill in the fall.
Right.
Those are the types of things that the
Right.
county needs to look at.
Yeah, they did. And I having been a past chairman of the El Dorado County Transportation Commission,
Yes.
I'm well aware
Yes.
of the situation and a number of the issues. And we've worked very closely with the Transit Authority on trying to get the buses and the
Right.
shuttle buses and all that. The problem is that the numbers don't pencil right. That hasn't worked. That has not been successful. It's been tried, but it's not been successful. So we have to look at, okay, why wasn't it successful, and what can we do to make it successful?
Right.
Because you're right, people hate coming up Highway 50 in the fall during Apple Hill season. I mean, it's level FF
Yeah,
as far as I'm
exactly.
concerned, and that discourages people. And I know, talking up to the Vismans up at Apple Hill, I know they had a good season this year, so that was good. But of course, another thing is dependent is weather, and we have the other industry, skiing,
Yes.
which got hit very hard.
Yes, that
this
was a tough year.
Yeah, it was a very tough year. Fortunately, they kind of caught up at the end, but they still lost a lot of money, and that's another big money maker. Heavenly and was it Echo Summit, Echo Ridge, and all that?
Sierra
And
Tahoe.
Sierra
Yep.
Tahoe. Those bring in a lot of money into the
Absolutely.
county. Yeah.
They also employ a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And most of those people are seasonal employment. But
Right.
for example, where I live in Coloma, many of the people that work during the summer in Coloma go to work in the winter in the ski resorts. And
Exactly.
so they have year-round work,
Right.
just in two different places.
Right.
And when that work is not there, they leave. A lot of those people that I know that
Yeah.
work in the valley during the summertime
Right.
had to leave the state and work elsewhere.
Yeah, I know.
And getting them back is harder.
Well, once they're entrenched in another job that they like, you're
Yeah.
never going to get them back.
Exactly.
And then as well as the workers in those, you got like the chain installers, those guys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's they depended to feed their family on that one season, so they could do other things. Some of them were subcontractors and things like that, and they would do. None of that happened this year. So they have to be prepared to, also look at a possibility that that income's not going to be there. And then it's our job, I really feel it's our job as a county to work like you're mentioning, to get those jobs in here. So, because it all starts, I think, my opinion, it all starts with those jobs. If we can keep the 20, 30s, and 40-somethings in El Dorado County and create jobs that are a career,
yes,
not just working.
Good paying, long-term, sustainable jobs,
Absolutely.
not part-time minimum wage jobs.
That's what we need.
That's a nice introduction. It's the transition job
Absolutely.
that everyone needs when they're younger,
Yep.
but you can't make a career out of minimum wage.
Not really.
No.
It's really, really difficult to do. So, and then, I think we've covered the gambit on that. With that to me is got to be your job when
Yes.
you're elected to really work on that. Get that, as best as you can, because I think it's really important to do that.
And I think that, long term, it's also important to have that stable base in the job market, because we don't want our economy to be 100% dependent on tourism.
Correct.
It's important for us to invest in it. It's important for us to make sure that we continue to support the tourism industry and grow the tourism industry.
Right.
But we don't want it to be 100%, right? And so we have to have other economic vertical markets in our economy in order to be stable.
Yeah, we do.
We have to work regionally. This is one of my big pushes I've been doing the last 3 or 4 years with many of the startup businesses in the area. We have to work with the region. That you can't isolate yourself as just one county going after everything.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening in the Sacramento region is going to affect us. So if we participate in that process with the region, we will get some of that in our area.
Well, SACOG is set up for that.
SACOG's a good one. SARTA's another one that's doing that.
Yeah.
I've been working with an incubator that just got an old elementary school or middle school donated to them in Folsom. It's called Velocity Venture.
Wow.
And he's doing a wonderful job there. Jack Crawford is his name, and he's been putting together a whole bunch of investors and startup businesses. He's been running an accelerator incubator program for 6 to 8 weeks through there.
Great.
I looked at starting an incubator here in El Dorado County about 2 or 3 years ago and realized that the funding for that was going to be challenging, and so that's how I got in touch with him, and we started looking at building this regionally. Those are the types of programs that are critical for us to have, because it creates that sense of vibrance, and people from other areas look at it and say, oh, something's happening there. It's what happened in Austin. It's what happened in Seattle. It's what happened in some of these other places that now people don't think they have to start their business in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Exactly.
It used to be that was the only place.
You had
New
to
York
be
City
there.
and Silicon were the only places you could go to start your business. Now, there's 8 or 10 or 20 of these places throughout the United States that
Yes.
have created that attraction and that vibrance.
Well, thank God for broadband, because that's really given the ability for these companies to spread out.
Wouldn't it be nice if we had that here in El Dorado
Yeah,
County?
it would be really nice, wouldn't it? And
I'm impressed that you have enough broadband here at this station to be able
do
to run
this.
your shop. Yeah.
Thank God we've got a great deal with CalNet.
Yes.
They're one of our sponsors.
Wonderful
and,
company.
and John Lane and the group have helped us out a lot, so I really appreciate it. I probably don't thank them enough for helping.
Well, I will also thank Cal.net, as well as another organization that's in this county that's worked really hard, which is Central Valley Broadband.
Right.
They're based out of Rockland, so I really like Cal.net as well because they're local, but CVB has done a wonderful job. And one of the things that happened when I first moved up here and I started running, I was kind of going back and forth between the Bay Area and here with with the different businesses, I needed better broadband, and I was using satellite.
Right.
Well, satellite doesn't work if you're trying to do anything serious, and everyone hates satellite.
Yeah.
In fact, the PUC just recently downgraded satellite, so it's not considered broadband now. In their attempt to try to get rural broadband out there, they're not considering satellite legitimate broadband.
Right.
So I had problems with latency. I had problems with connections.
Yeah, you see there's a dish in our building, but we haven't used it in 15 years.
Exactly. And so what I did, and this was early 2000s, brought in a couple T1 lines, bonded them together, and then created a wireless network to service about 10 to 12 businesses in the area to share the cost of the T1s.
Sure.
And that worked fine, except for the fact that I was always getting the phone calls on desktop
How come it's
support.
down?
How come the internet's down? And
Your tech support now.
yeah, well, the internet wasn't down. Their computer was down.
Yeah, right.
But the long and short was that shortly after that, the ISP that was in Shingle Springs, the predecessor to Cal.net, I handed those customers off to and said, here, let's grow this. And so helping them grow that to 400, 500, 600 customers now in the Colombo Lotus and Pilot Hill area. Cal.net has been the company that took that over. Yeah. They have done a great job of moving forward with technology. The technology that's available to us now is significantly different than it was 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
They've got licensed Wi-Fi now, so the 3.2 frequency.
Right.
They've got the 5.1 gigahertz frequency, which is really good. I get connections that are 20 megs up and 20 megs down. wirelessly. One of the other projects that's happened recently that is really important for our county is what CVIN is doing, Central Valley Internet Network out of the Sacramento area. They got a lot of money from public funding, and they got some private investment from AT&T and some other companies, and they're lacing hundreds of miles of fiber optic up and down the foothills.
Okay.
They've been pulling that fiber optic for the last 6 months to a year.
Right.
And trenching is very expensive.
Right.
But to get that fiber optic backbone in place, to reach all these remote rural areas like Georgetown, like Somerset, is important because then we can use that backbone and distribute the last mile wirelessly. And so that hybrid approach,
Right.
I think, is going to be the solution for rural broadband in this county.
I hope so. But you're still going to have pockets. Example,
Right.
we're that pocket. AT&T, when they brought their fiber through, they completely. We're off of Fowler in Highway 49. They completely went right past us and went up the hill and went all the way up to Grizzly Flat, but never stopped. In this whole community here, there's, I don't know, probably 300-400 people and homes in this area. No type of physical broadband whatsoever.
So here's the trick. The trick is that when they pull fiber optic like that, they're not going to put in what's called the split points,
Right.
or the remote terminals. It's expensive for those companies, AT&T or this consortium, to put that in and then wire the last mile
Sure.
to everyone's house.
Sure.
And they're not going to pull fiber optic to everyone's house because
Right.
that's really expensive. But what you can do is lease access to that fiber optic. So a private company like Cal.net can lease access to that fiber optic and then re-disseminate that signal wirelessly.
Exactly.
Here's where the county can help. Here's where a supervisor can help. We can, first of all, reduce the permit fees and the regulations to
Right.
put in wireless towers.
Right.
These are not cell phone towers. For
Right.
the last year and a half, I've been working with Cal.net, CVB, and the county on trying to reduce the permitting process for putting in short little 8, 10, 12-foot poles
Yeah.
with the short little radio on it
Right.
for WISP, for the wireless internet service.
Right.
They've been treated as though they're cell phone towers
Yeah, I know.
and asking for a $3,600 permit application plus all the engineering drawings, which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that makes no sense to try to incent rural broadband to be deployed.
And in my opinion, the problem with that, having been an ISP and working with the FCC and some of the other agencies, they still don't get rural. Now, the president came out and said, yes, we need to get broadband into the rural areas. And those are nice sound bites.
Yes.
But it's tough to actually implement it because, as you mentioned, it's millions and millions
Yeah.
of dollars to get this going.
And,
So,
and the deployment is complicated.
yeah, and you, and at the end of the day, you got to pencil it out so that you can make a profit.
Yeah.
So we're fighting all those issues, and I think it's important, and I hope it gets solved. We have a small solution now, and there's some other things I want to do. We'll talk about that off there. I'd love to start a station kind of like Georgetown did. I would like to do a PBS station and get that set up and do it. My love is radio. I was in radio in L.A.
Okay.
And I would love to do it. I just the permitting process and everything that's involved with it, and trying to get that last mile to the towers is just almost impossible.
Absolutely. And I think what the county can be really helpful with, what a supervisor can be really helpful with, is putting that infrastructure in place. The cost of putting in all these little split points and these RTs,
Right.
remote terminals,
Right.
the permitting process for putting those things in, all the different towers that need to go up in different places to be able to pass this signal along.
Exactly.
That's all the infrastructure stuff that the county can be better at.
Well,
And also, we can invest some money into, and here's my thing, I love private-public partnerships.
right.
We can, as a public agency, put some money and invest into that, and then have these companies rent it back, and it will pay for itself over 15 or 20 years.
Absolutely.
To ask these small, and these are small, Cal.net and CVB companies, your
Yeah,
ISP,
yeah.
they're not AT&Ts and Verizons of the world.
Not
they don't
even
have
close.
they don't have $100 million sitting in a bank account they can go and invest in all this stuff. So we need to encourage and incent these companies to want to participate, and they will do that. You know, John Lane, the owner of Cal.net,
Sure.
wonderful guy. He will put his own money into it
Oh, yeah.
to do the last mile. Yeah. But he's not going to invest $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 to put infrastructure in place. And we need broadband because that's so critical for our at-home businesses.
Everything.
60% of many of our small businesses are at-home businesses
Exactly.
in my district.
Exactly.
And if you don't have good broadband,
Yeah,
they
you
go
can't do
elsewhere.
your job.
No.
I mean, Intel's got a deal where a majority of their, depending on what departments, people work at home 4 days a week and
Sure.
1 day a week at the facility, and those people could not come up in El Dorado Hills and do that job because we don't have the broadband that they need to be able to do their jobs. So obviously that's an issue that I'm glad to hear that's in your preview.
Right.
Here's another issue.
Okay.
As you tour county facilities,
Mm-hmm.
we have many buildings that I wouldn't house my dog in, that we've got people in. And that's, it sounds funny, but it's true. We've got a sheriff's facility that is so bad that they couldn't house prisoners in these cells, but yet they have people working.
It was
down
the
there.
old jail.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
They have their evidence locker in an old jail cell.
Yep.
And it's just ridiculous.
Well, it's, and they're doing the best they can, but, and I know it's being addressed. They're finally looking at site selection and that, but we've got the same situation with the courts.
Yeah.
If you look at our mental health facility and senior
It's falling
programs
apart.
of it, that building should be just demolished.
Yeah.
It shouldn't even be there. So how do we address those issues?
Well, and here's let's go back to the problem first, which is obviously you've identified the problem. The second part of that problem is that our focus has been on Highway 50.
Right.
Not on our infrastructure elsewhere. And infrastructure means our buildings, our public buildings, our surface roads in communities, our broadband infrastructure. So when I say infrastructure, I mean all those pieces.
Right.
If all of our focus, time, and money has gone on Highway 50, that's why all of this stuff is not being done.
Addressed right.
It is
Yep.
money. It absolutely is costs, right? We have to have the money to be able to pay
Yes.
to do the deferred
Yes.
maintenance and the capital improvements for these buildings. So my solution is, let's get off of focusing on 50. We don't need to focus all of our attention and money on 50. And the reason why we can do that is instead of having all the projected houses on 50, we stay with the current inventory that we have, build what we have first for the next
Right.
15 to 20 years,
Right.
which is plenty of inventory
yeah.
to meet our
Absolutely.
needs, and then take that time, energy, and money in our capital improvement plan and focus it on the sheriff's building. We've been very fortunate to finally come up with a great solution for the animal shelter. I was just there for the red ribbon cutting ceremony, and it's going to be a wonderful facility when they're done with it. It's too bad we didn't do that 6-8 years ago when we started. We would have saved a lot of money with that equation. And so I'm a big fan of make sure that you come up with a plan and then execute the plan and move forward. And stop kind of going with multiple plans that sit on desk for 20 years and don't
Well,
get done.
and that's been the problem. Everybody wanted to just, you know what, I don't have a great solution. I'm going to just let the next supervisor worry about that. And that's been the way it's been going for, 30 plus years. I've watched the situation. They're good at identifying problems. They're not good at solving the problems.
And the challenge there is that when you get into politics like that, and I've been working with the county for 15 plus years on different projects throughout the county, you see very quickly that people are kind of doing the easiest, least resistant
I call
approach.
it low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, low-hanging fruit. You're just going to take the path of least resistance
That's
because I want to get elected next time.
Right.
Well, I'm not a career politician. This is
Right.
my first time running for an elected office. I run businesses. Businesses don't survive unless you make things happen. You will get run over by the business that's coming up behind you if you don't
Yes.
figure out how to do something better. So I'm always about making things happen. Now,
Right.
you need to do that within the context of the board, which is 5 supervisors. So
Right.
it's not just me.
No, right.
But you work together to make that happen, and you have to start looking 10 years and 20 years down the road. I am always with my business managers, working with them to not look at just next month and next year,
Right.
but 5 and 10 years. And if you're not planning farther than 5 years ahead, it's going to get here before you know it.
Oh,
You're going to
yeah.
be behind the 8 ball.
Oh, yeah. And that's exactly what's happened here in El Dorado County.
Absolutely.
We keep falling further and further behind. And instead of solving a solution, they've been making a solution.
And I was going to say, I think one of the big challenges at the county level to do that has been the way in which the staff has been managed. I am a huge fan, having worked for years in organizational development and the private sector and helping companies organize correctly. You can't have managers, and in this case, a board of supervisors, that any given Tuesday changes the direction and goes one way one Tuesday and the next direction next Tuesday, and you've got 1,700 to 2,000 employees looking at that going, which direction is the ship going?
Yeah.
Am I going to be on the ship today? I'm going to be off the ship today.
Right.
And so you can't do that. And not only that, but when you change departments heads every month or two, and you've heard the statistics of how many Health and Human Service directors we've gone through and how many DOT directors we've gone through, the question is why? Why have we gone through that many directors? It starts at the top.
Yep.
And if your board of supervisors are micromanaging, you got the wrong board.
Yeah.
Right? You can't micromanage from the board level. You have to empower your CAO. You have to empower your department heads. If they're not doing their jobs, and you've given them the tools and the resources to do their jobs well, and you've given them the direction and stick with that direction, they don't do their jobs well, then you can start talking about changing, and how you're going to reorganize and change. But you don't do that on a daily basis. You don't do that every given Tuesday.
Right.
That's the challenge with any board, private board, nonprofit board, or public board,
Sure.
to manage their staff well.
So you've identified something that I call a professional politician. We have that in state levels, and even though there's term limits, they flip to if I'm an assemblyman, this amount of terms, I'll flip to Senate, and the senator will flip back, and
Yep.
we have people that have been there that were supposed to be out a long time ago. The way it works,
Right.
and we don't get the far thinkers, the new thinkers into positions that I think we really need. And we kind of see that a little bit even at the supervisor level here. I mean, because we get people with you're on this point here and this supervisor in this point, and there's no middle ground. Nobody wants to work with each other. And that's happened a lot.
Yes.
And I think with this election coming up, particularly with District 4 and 5, coming in with brand new people,
Yep.
I think we have an opportunity to finally maybe get somewhere and get some of these things done.
Absolutely. And for me, it's very, very critical to have a good working relationship with everyone on any board that I serve on.
Sure.
And in order to do that, two things for me. One, you have to be available, both physically available, functionally available, and psychologically available. You can't go in with a dogma that is absolute. You've got to be able to listen.
Right.
You got to be able to hear what other people are saying.
Exactly.
And on any board, to bring boards along and build consensus, you have to build trust. And you have to do that on a personal level first. So one of the things that people often say is, I saw these two supervisors talking in the hallway or speaking, having lunch together, and they must be convorting on something or whatever. It's like, to get anything done, you have to develop a personal relationship. It doesn't
Right.
mean that you break the Brown Act.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you do backdoor deals. I'm not encouraging or supporting all that. I absolutely support transparency and accountability and so forth. But you've got to develop a personal relationship with people. And you've got to do that with the board, and you've got to do that with staff.
Yeah.
And that's how you build an organization, is with that type of trust first.
One of the other issues that I've watched supervisors struggle with a little bit is their workload. I mean, if you are really doing your job, I mean, I've seen people that, they just wanted the title and haven't done the study and the work that they need. But, when you become a supervisor, your workload is huge.
Yep.
And there is a solution to that, which they actually took a step backwards. I'll give you an example. Let's talk about the Transportation Commission again.
Okay.
It used to be that the supervisor in a district could appoint somebody they thought that would be really good and had the time to sit on a board, and let's just say the Transportation Commission, and then report back to the supervisors their findings and their opinions.
Yep.
So you've eliminated, because Transportation Commission has a huge workload just in itself.
Yep.
So when I was appointed, and I sat on the board, and I worked my way all the way up to chairman, one of the electeds from the city of Placerville that sits on that board too decided, you know what, they didn't like me. We were oil and water, and so they got the supervisors to agree that the only people that can sit on that board are elected officials. So right away you've taken away the ability for a supervisor to have some breath of air to know what's going on.
Right.
I know for a fact you can't know everything that's going on in that commission alone
Right.
without some help, and it's like, so why would we do that? And they did it for one reason. It's because it was a vendetta.
Yeah.
And that's the way this county's run.
Yeah.
If you argue, and I think that's part of the department head problems.
Yeah.
When the supervisors micromanage, and what's your incentive? You're getting pounded constantly. You want to love where you work, and longevity in these jobs is important because you have to have institutional knowledge to move forward. You lose that. Like you said, we talked about HR heads alone.
Yeah.
You can't keep them.
You can't keep them. And then your productivity drops.
Exactly.
And then when people say, when customers or residents go in and they have a bad customer service experience at the planning department, the building department,
Exactly.
and they complain about, well, this person didn't know what I asked them, and they have to go find out, and I didn't get a response quickly, and so forth. That's all from top down.
Right.
That environment, whether it's a restaurant you're running, or an auto body shop, or a planning department desk, all of those scenarios with customers are all about having your employees empowered to make decisions,
Right.
having them feel comfortable and confident about the job, and having the tools to do it, and that comes from the top.
So what you're talking about is like running a business. I mean, this is the way government needs to run.
Absolutely. I say from an organizational point of view, there's a lot that we can learn from business. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I do also appreciate the difference between a private sector business and a public
There
government.
are different rules.
There are different rules.
Yes, I
but I
understand
think that
that.
we can learn from the efficiencies. I've had experience with working with lots of companies
Mm-hmm.
and reorganizing departments and so forth. And more importantly, just helping create the culture of positive influence and positive
Right.
impacts
Right.
that have a can-do environment as opposed to a cannot environment.
Yeah.
Instead of being told no every time you walk into someplace, like a planning permit application, to be said, you know what, that's a little complicated, but let me sit down and figure out how we can make this work with you.
It's a whole different mindset, and we need to get that way again. And we got to remember what customer service is all about. And unfortunately, a lot of times in government, you lose that. But what bothers me is that we don't have a great retention value of employees in El Dorado County. Pay's part of it, but the other is it's just not a friendly place to work.
No. And if you have department heads that are changing every month or two,
Yeah.
and you have that kind of oppressive environment and culture that's there, nobody wants to work there.
Right.
And so what we end up with is people that are coming to El Dorado County because they live here and that's where they want to work.
Right.
Or we get people at the end of their career that want to retire here.
Right.
And they work for the last 2 or 3 years and then they retire from the county. So you don't
Right.
have any longevity there.
Yeah.
That's slowly changing now.
Yeah.
And there's some new hires that have come in. There's a new director of community development agency
Mm-hmm.
that has come in from Sacramento County, and wonderful gentleman. I've just met him once, so
Good.
he's just getting his feet on the ground. We have a new director of the future planning department. Wonderful person. I've met him and have had a number of meetings with him on different projects. So we have some new energy coming in.
Good.
Now the job of the supervisors are take care of that energy,
Yeah.
nurture that energy,
Yeah.
promote that scenario. If
You
you've
know,
got good
from-
people in the jobs, hold on
Oh,
to
yeah.
them
Oh,
and
yeah.
empower them.
For me, out of all these years I've been here, and I wanted to raise my family here. I want to live here. I want to work here. I actually feel like there's a breath of fresh air coming in this election. I'm excited about this. Even though I'm not in District 405, I'm excited about this election because I'm hoping that this new board will actually do the things that need to be done. So I'm excited about it, and our viewers, you guys should be excited about voting for it too, because it's really important.
Absolutely vote.
Go ahead.
Everybody has to vote. This is
Oh
my
yeah,
pitch.
yeah, and that's my point. That you vote.
I would love for you to vote for me, but if you vote for, get out there and study. Read the websites, read the
Absolutely.
ballots, talk to your
Absolutely.
neighbors. Go out there and make an educated decision and vote. It is
Yeah.
so important.
It is. It's really important.
And for all your special districts too. Water district, school
Oh
districts,
yeah,
fire
EID,
districts. those are
whatever it may
important.
be. It,
Yeah.
it starts everywhere, and I can't thank you enough for coming in here. And I don't. One of the reasons I did this is because people can't get to know the candidates very well by just going to a fundraiser, or
Right.
they need to be able to see the person. We're going to be on YouTube as well as our site, so if you're interested in Howard at any time, go watch this interview. And you know what? I bet if you call, he'll even answer the phone and
will.
talk to you. And that's the
The
important
phone number
part.
on my website goes directly to me.
There you
So,
go. See, so that works. And I'll share a little story with you, which gives me a really good feeling. At the last election, we set up our news team out in front of elections, and Bill Schultz gave us an opportunity to go in elections and show how the votes are counted and how everything's taken care of in the whole process. And that video is still good today as it was 2 years ago. But the thing that got me, that was really exciting, is we set up outside, and as people were coming in voting, particularly the younger couples, I'd could you have a minute and talk to me about this? I want to know why you took your time and effort to come and vote. And we had a couple that just almost melted my heart. They said, you know what, we're mid-20s, we've never voted in our lives, either of them, never voted. And they said, I finally got it, and I'm so excited to vote. And it was thus, oh my God, thank goodness you're here. Because this is what we need. We need to get you younger people out there that feel disenfranchised on voting to understand that a local election is completely different. Your vote counts.
Yep.
So it really
You're
does.
voting
So
for your neighbors.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got neighbors that have known me for years, and they're like, oh, this is wonderful that you're running,
Yeah.
and we'll come out and help support you and so forth. So it's people. You're voting for people that live right next door.
Right.
Most of us that are running have not had an elected office before.
right.
And that's the way our system and our democracy is supposed to work. It's the way that the founding fathers set up Congress.
Yep.
It hasn't
It was
been
the
executed.
farmer-
It hasn't been executed that
No,
way
it
so much
hasn't.
in the last couple hundred, in the last 100 years.
Yes,
but
no.
But
it was supposed to be the farmer politician.
Yeah.
That's the way it was initially done.
Absolutely.
So and we didn't get that. So now recently it's just been awful.
Right.
But
I've been talking with some of the water district and fire district board members, as well as the people that live in those different districts, and I keep telling people it's just as important to get involved in your local special districts, your school, fire, and water,
Absolutely.
as it is with the county supervisor race, because those are people that are making decisions about your fire programs, about the rates of your water, where they're investing money, and we've
Right.
seen what's happened with EID in the past.
Right.
And we know if that's not managed correctly, it costs us all money if you're a ratepayer in EID.
Exactly.
So water being a big issue this year,
Right.
the silver lining of the drought is that it's heightened water as an issue, both
Right.
for our future growth and projections of our housing growth, as well as for people getting involved and participating in this process.
Absolutely.
So-
Well, Howard, say your website again so people know it.
It's electpenn.com.
Can't get any easier than that.
Yeah, electpenn.com. Phone numbers on there. Email form to send in. You can donate on the website. Sign up to volunteer for the campaign. We have 120 something volunteers that are participating in the campaign, and it's been a wonderful experience. It's great to get out there and meet people. It's very humbling to have all these people come out to support me.
It is.
It's the first time I've actually put myself forward
Right.
as the entity or the product,
Yep.
right? As opposed to my business experience, which is usually selling a product
Right.
or a service.
Right. Yeah.
And so when people endorse you
Yeah.
or they support you, it feels really
Yeah,
humbling.
it is, isn't it?
And
Yeah.
and there's a huge responsibility to that
Yeah.
for me. It's the same way I've treated how I've run my businesses with my employees.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important to me. They're my family. Doing that as a representative of the constituents and the electorate
Right.
is a big responsibility.
Well,
So-
absolutely, and I appreciate you taking that position because, as we know, some don't. And you're absolutely right. It's humbling. And one of the neat things about Old Guy Tech TV is that we have the ability to do a lot of things here. And one of the things was our goal is to get everybody that was running for office into our studios so we can just have a chat. That's all we've done. We've talked a little bit. You get to know Howard's positions. You kind of get to know my position a little bit. You know how conservative I am. And then I try to stay away from the real tough questions until the primary is over.
Yeah. Well, I will absolutely come back in a general if
Then we'll whack
if
you.
the voters will have me and they put me through to the
Absolutely.
primary. I would love to come back.
Well, I'd love to have you here. And when you're donating for Howard, hit that donation button for Old Guy Tech TV
Yes.
too, because you know what? We're 100% run by donations, and we really need your help to keep this going. And we've got some future plans we really would like to do, but it takes money.
It does take money.
Howard, thank you again so much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you
and
for
I
having
appreciate
me.
you coming. It's been a great time with you.
Yes.
We had a great interview. And again, people, get out there and vote. This is Rob with Old Guy Tech TV Interviews. We'll see you next time.